My name is David O'Kane and I'm a visual artist based in Berlin. I come from Ireland originally and studied in Dublin and then continued to study in Leipzig and ended up in Berlin with the studio. I wrote my thesis on absurdity and the game of painting and spoke about the work of Mikko Boromans, and I was interested in their approach to painting and play in particular, and absurdity as the result out of this. And it was a text by a Dutch philosopher, cultural historian, Johan Huizinga. It was called Homo Ludens, an analysis of the play element in culture. This was something fundamental and primary to how culture is generated and how we as human beings actually interact with the world. That was then when it solidified and became a fundamental element in my process, but also in my own interpretation or my own experience of the work. It began with a few ideas for staging different works. There was time-lapse photography happening, but also video. And so what I'll do is I'll have slow motion video capturing a playful performance where I have models posing for this. And these are all very informal. This is not necessary. This is sometimes with family members, with friends. I think it is quite important too is not to formalize the whole thing too much. Within that, I'll have this video footage and the different photographs, and I will start editing down what I've got to what I find viscerally interesting. Maybe narrow that down to a few hundred photographs, and then leave it for a few days, and then edit that down to 10 or 20. Keep doing that, so it'll be this process of honing it down, eliminating things really. What I'll do is I'll draw it with very thin paint, so that the drawing can just be dissolved. And I will start working up the image, and through that process, the paint will dictate to a certain extent, being mindful of the paint and how it's reacting, and how the different elements are reacting with each other. You never know exactly what you're going to end up with. You know the general direction, but you arrive at somewhere that's a little surprising to yourself. That's the moment you know that you're happy with it. You have a little bit of a shock in the painting for yourself. I was looking, especially through things like the allegory of the cave that Plato talks about. We project concepts onto the world, divide it up and figure out this is a certain object, and we don't understand it until we've actually broken it down into these different concepts. So for me, it was interesting that dichotomy or duality between what is illusion and what we take to be reality, and to question these two things. Through that series of work and through the play and chance of performativity, I realized that the key subjects in it were light, but also the fabric of the canvas itself. So it's the canvas as the carrier of meaning, but also as the obscurer of meaning in a way. It's hiding the figure and it's encompassing the figure. The title of the exhibition, Symphony of Selves, comes through this. The figure of the self is analysed and portrayed very concretely, but also hidden. The more I looked into what it is to make a self-portrait, the more I realised you're looking at something that is actually quite unknowable. We can never see our face except through the mediation of a video camera or a mirror. Actually, you understand yourself through interaction with other people, and your sense of self is defined in that sense. One of the key paintings for me in this exhibition is a painting called The Conversation that depicts an artist's self-portrait, but as a sort of an obscured figure hidden under the canvas fabric again. And that painting's based on a small Rembrandt painting from 1628. What the painting does is it puts the viewer in the position of subject to what Velázquez did in Las Meninas. And the other reference for that painting is a 1969 painting called The Studio by Philip Guston, which is... The art historical references have always been important because that's what's fascinated me. Artists in particular like Francis Bacon or Caravaggio, they've always exerted a huge influence, and I think we make art partially because we've seen art. In my childhood, that was what my father was showing me, what we were seeing in museums, but also hundreds of art books at home, and also just watching my older brother and my parents be inspired by other artists. I suppose for me the important part is that the artworks remain open, and that even the things I'm talking about now needn't be the actual interpretation of them. In the end, an artwork needs to be experienced rather than analysed or deconstructed. That's probably the most important message for anyone experiencing these paintings. They're not conceptual per se, they're visceral experiences.